Hey, Stephen, Shaya, thank you for coming in. Really, just a remarkable journey you continue to have. And we already done a prior interview a few years ago now, and you've done so much more in this catalytic journey of servant leadership and guiding and acting as a model for the world, but also executing in so many different domains, whether it's through impact or youth leadership or entrepreneurship or enterprise value, catalytic sort of investment vehicles. I mean, whatever you do, it's always in service to the world and service to the broader community. So thank you for coming in and sharing your experiences with our audience.
Well, Stephen, thank you for, your friendship and your support. And I feel we were brought together because we both have servant leaders' hearts, and it's about something bigger than ourselves. So I'm just always grateful that we connected, and I know there's a lot of great opportunities to make a catalytic difference in the world together. So thank you so much.
So, Stephen, let's do a little bit of catch up. You have this amazing enterprise, J&B Medical. Perhaps you can describe, how that a series of enterprises, the best in the world, and you hit something like 240 million or 250 million Americans, right? And globally, because you're in all these different countries as well. So, how have you been scaling and continue to scale that consortium of diverse enterprises, advancing healthcare in so many different ways and digital solutions worldwide? How have you been embedding some of the revolutions that are occurring? And then we'll get to things like Shemek and some of the other projects you're working on. But let's talk about this anchor enterprise that's very much amazing in the world.
Well, thanks again. So J&B Medical is a family-owned business started in 1996. We always say affectionately, because my mother owns 100% of it, that she's boss at home and at work. So every talk I give, I always try to recognize my mother, because a wise person said you can never compliment your mother enough. So I always remembered that. But we have today 19 different business enterprises. We run the gamut from medical distribution, where we sell everything that goes in a hospital, pharmacy, physician's office, supply equipment, pharmaceuticals, to specialty businesses like animal health. We've tied in animal health to human health, long story for a different day. But our claim to fame is we're one of the largest third-party billers of consumable medical products to the homes in the United States. On the medical side, we reach over 260 million people via our insurance contracts, diabetic supplies, wound care, ostomy, insulin pumps, continuous glucose monitors. On the pharmacy side, we reach over 200 million. So if a patient's diabetic, not only can we provide their insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors and their test strips, but we can also provide the insulin and all the other medicines for them. We also have a telemedicine telehealth company. We are doing virtual visits around the world. We are doing mental health screenings in children, grades 6 through 12. Currently, we do that in 32 states, places like Colorado, Maryland, Louisiana, and we're screening for mental health conditions like anxiety, depression. 1 out of 15 children that we screen has a plan to commit suicide in 12 months. So we screen them and identify them, and we've been able to cut down suicide ideation by 80% once we've identified them. We're in 49 states. We're in 28 countries today. It's a family business. I get fired fairly regularly, but fortunately, I have 3 grandchildren for my mother. So when I'm not in her good graces, bringing the grandchildren over usually is the panacea for any troubles. And then I have my own family office called Akkad Holdings the Akkadian Empire was the first empire in Mesopotamia, and they were the great connectors of their time. So the mantra of the family office is very mission driven, it's very intentional. People, purpose, pay it forward. But the thesis was to invest in opportunities that could leverage our global distribution channel. So I won't bore you with all the different deals we've done since 2017, but we're building today a $5.8 billion biotech life sciences vertical. We're building a $6.5 billion health sports media vertical. And then now collaboratively with my dear friend and brother, we hope to build an epic kind of tech vertical. And so, it's truly an honor. Our meaning, our purpose, our why is to make healthcare as affordable and accessible to as many people as we can globally. God, that's why God put us on this earth, and we're just stewards of the blessings.
Well, so that encompasses, as you mentioned, Shemek, IV Solutions, which is your massive, multi-billion dollar, biomedical, biopharmaceutical manufacturing initiative, and you broke ground and things like that. You talked about being in sports as well, but in your creative media impact, you actually were executive producer. Can you talk about that?
So it's very interesting. So I've had a lot of friends whose children have autism, and their children and families have been stigmatized over the years in a variety of different ways. And I had an opportunity a couple months ago to support a young kind of enterprising uh, you know person who is directing a what they call a short documentary called Saving Superman on autism. So it was kind of a last minute thing. I have no background in media or entertainment other than I like to watch movies like The Godfather, and I kind of Shawshank Redemption, and I watch, there's certain movies I've kind of watched many times. I kind of have my go-tos. And so they said they needed some financial support, and I helped them. They said, we're going to make you executive producer. I had no idea what that meant, to be honest with you. So I'm like, okay. And then next thing I know, they win the Critics' Choice, and which is a very prominent award. And it was kind of, there's a lot of serendipity in it. And, my goal, my intention, I'm certainly not a media type or Hollywood type. But somehow, sometimes some things just work out. Now this film ended up not winning the Academy Award, but considering this young man who started from nothing to win a Critics' Choice was pretty amazing. I believe he's going to make a full movie one day on Saving Superman. So I feel like everyone's got their calling, everyone's got their journey, Stephen. And to kind of help a young person who's trying to build up their future and doing something that's very important to them, which I think is also very important to society. So there's so many different ways today to reach people, to reach their hearts and minds. I feel God made me an evangelist of sort. I love to shake hands, kiss babies, eat a lot of hummus. And I just feel like it was such a blessing, and it was a great opportunity. And it's just funny how things work out. If good people, good intentions, sometimes great things happen.
Stephen, again, you do so much across so many different dimensions and globally that awards flow in, and it's not that you're seeking awards, but they just come because you're doing such marvelous work. And in fact, what it does, it allows you to even reverberate even further the global impact you have. And I'm just going to sort of list some of them just as a bit of as a background, because you've got some recent honors as well. But you let's say in 2015 awarded the Global Distinguished Healthcare Award from the Center of Economic and Leadership Development alongside a U.S. Congressional Commendation. 2016, honored with the Global Medical Innovation Leadership Award at the United Nations, coupled with a commendation for the New York State Senate. 2017, named Father of the Year by the American Diabetes Association. 2021, presented with the Vatican Pontifical Hero Award for inspiration during the Cura Foundation Fifth International Vatican Conference, recognizing all of the dedication you've done across the global healthcare and access. 2022 and 24 awarded the Presidential Leadership Award and the gold medal by the FBI, National Citizens Academy Alumni Association, and subsequent Presidential Leadership Award, recognized for your family contribution and outreach. You received the AAPI Presidential Healthcare Leadership Award for your efforts at revolutionizing healthcare delivery, as well as the Order of Charity for Accession Health, invested with a rare merit-based Vatican Knighthood. Now, I want you to describe that because that's very, very rare and it has an incredible history.
Well, thank you for all that. It's a little embarrassing. Again, I'm not seeking these recognitions, but if, God, bringing them on my journey, there's a reason. And I'm hoping, I know people can go far beyond anything I've done. So I'm Roman Catholic. My family's always come from even, from humble beginnings. And, my grandmother was she raised 11 children, and when her husband passed away, she raised all 11 children on her own. And you know to support her family, she was a midwife, and she delivered thousands and thousands and thousands of babies, and many times people couldn't afford to pay her. Um, and so she really came and led. She had such joy in giving. So that's kind of the context and color. I always remember how happy my grandmother was, even though she had nothing material. The joy, the richness she had in giving and helping people. It just she would light up like a Christmas tree, and it was such a beautiful thing. So that left an indelible mark on my spirit. And recently I was awarded the Order of Christ. There's some long title, Imperial Order. It's a long title. I forget it all now, to be honest with you. So there's 50 people in the world that have this designation today, and it's the only order that goes back to the Templar Knights. And in 1319, they were disbanded. But this is the only continuous order tied into the Templar Knights. So it was kind of an offshoot, the next chapter of the Knights Templar. And the criteria for it was that you had to be nobility, or you had to be a cardinal or bishop. And so today, out of the 50 members, there's only 50 members in the Order of Christ. I found out there's only 2 Knights of Merit. So myself and somebody else, he's out of Spain. And then the rest, you have to come from nobility. They actually trace your family tree all the way back. A couple members that I just saw in London, one of them's family tree is 900 years old, another one's 850 years. So it turns out during this process, I'm Chaldean, that Chaldeans trace all the way back to Abraham. So Abraham actually lived in Iraq originally, and he was Chaldean. And then he went to Israel, and then of course he became Jewish. So somehow Chaldeans are tied all the way back to it. So, but I'm one of 2 Knights of Merit. It was a kind of a solemn ceremony at the papal residence in October. It was very humbling. It's kind of funny because my wife and my mother are like, I'm not calling you Sir Stephen. And I'm like, what about Saint Stephen? And I thought it was funny, but they don't find it. But it is a chivalric order. It is considered the most exclusive order in the world. So there's a lot of orders: the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus. There's many different orders, chivalric orders, they call them. But this is the most exclusive one because you either have to be a nobility or you have to be a cardinal or bishop. And then there's only two Knights of Merit. So to be honest with you, I don't know. It's super humbling. I mean, I know there's many people that are warranted. Probably done a lot more and contribute a lot more than I have. So it's just super humbling, and it's very interesting. Also, I was just in London, and when I think of nobility, I think of like the King of England, and kind of the English version of it. But it's super interesting, and this is tied directly to the Vatican, and I it's just very humbling, and it's words can't describe the feeling.
Well, invested with this rare merit-based Vatican knighthood, it's the Knight of Merit, Imperial Order of the Lord Jesus Christ in Italy, and it's honoring your lifelong dedication to faith and global service. But you were able to take your family along, so to have that kind of being the presence of the pontiff and being honored directly by the Pope, and then being able to tour the Vatican. I mean, that experience would be a lifelong kind of inflection point in your family's life as well, right?
Well, I just want to be a good role model to my children and to others. And again, I am not seeking these recognitions. So, there was a time in my life that was important. And I think that, when I was seeking all that stuff, then, it was always just out of my fingertips. You know what I mean? And then when you have children, and when you come to through the on your journey, and you realize that, look, I'm at peace with who I am. This is what God wants for me. When you kind of come to that realization of, they say you chase your passion and you find your purpose. And so, I think my purpose is to be an evangelist, to shake hands, kiss babies, to find amazing people like you, Stephen, and kind of develop these unique partnerships. I mean, partnerships, there's the five ships. My mentor always used to say relationship, fellowship, friendship, partnership, discipleship. And I feel with you, I have that partnership, discipleship level of relationship, and to kind of have these deep, meaningful connections with people that you feel you can change the world with. It's very humbling. I feel like that's what God made me for. And every moment that I have on this earth, I want to go out there and try to touch people's hearts and minds and see how we can, make the world a better place together. So if these recognitions are a way to reach people, so be it. I know there's a lot of other ways. I just want to be what God meant me to be, and be a good example, particularly for my children.
Well, again, it's remarkable, and I'm just going to go through a few more. Now, you already mentioned the Critics' Choice Award for the Best Short Documentary as executive producer for Saving Superman. That's very touching as well, and it's a beacon for the world. And then you were at the Super Bowl, the 39th annual Super Bowl, and you were honored with another award. Can you talk about that one?
Well, so there's a gentleman named Lee Steinberg who's a famous sports agent. If you ever saw the movie Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise, that's
Right.
who they made the movie out of. Show me the money, or in my world, show me the hummus. So um, they called me up a couple months ago, and I had presented at his event last year on mental health, and they said that you were getting, an award as the humanitarian, as one of the humanitarians of the year. Now, this organization is, I mean, unbelievable. For 39 years straight, they have been doing events right before the Super Bowl. And I mean, the people that they've recognized are a who's who in sports and entertainment. So, just to give you an idea, a couple of the other people that were recognized, Ray Lewis, who's a famous linebacker with the Baltimore Ravens, Hall of Fame linebacker. Um, you had Steve Young, who's a Hall of Fame quarterback from the San Francisco 49ers, and Art Rooney II, who's an owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, just to give you an idea of people. But again, there's certain ways to bring people together. My way, Stephen, has always been health. You give people health, you give them hope. That's one way to bring people together. Good food, people like good food, good music. Sadly, I can't sing. I can just sing in the shower. My daughter is a great singer, but she didn't get that from me. Fortunately, she got her singing prowess from her mother. And then sports. In sports, the language of sports is one way to bring people together. So I've always, we saw the Olympics recently in Milan Cortina, and you saw, the incredible, patriotism with all the different athletes and their countries. And it's just a way to bring people together across the religious, and political, and socioeconomic divide. So I was honored to get chosen. Again, it's not something I solicited. Uh, it was something I didn't pay any money for it. Sometimes, people, as I like to say, being Middle Eastern, it's hard to get proverbial hummus out of the Middle Eastern guy. So it's not something I paid for. It's not something that I have, sought after. It did give me an opportunity to share some very heartfelt thoughts about my journey, and they gave me about 5 minutes to kind of share some thoughts about servant leadership and why servant leadership's important. So again, I see these things, the recognitions are secondary. I see these things as an opportunity to kind of share a message with the world. I'm kind of, again, just a steward of the blessing, and, God works through me to kind of, share things that maybe people need at the moment. But again, if you chase your passion, you find your purpose. And for me, being a servant leader like my grandmother, like my late father, I feel that that's what God made me to do. And at every opportunity, I'm going to do my best to share my journey authentically.
Well, I'm going to talk about one more. You just got off the plane from London and you met Stephen Ball, chairman of the Queen Elizabeth II Commonwealth Trust, and something miraculous happened there as well. Can you give us some background on what happened? And I know that I was looking at my news feeds this morning, and this was in my news feeds about this latest honor. And it's a remarkable honor because it's across 56 Commonwealth nations as well, right? So,
Yeah, again, I mean, totally caught me off guard. So Stephen Ball is the chairman of the Queen Elizabeth the Second Commonwealth Trust, and it's a charity that Queen Elizabeth herself had helped set up with Stephen. They're in 56 countries today. They're tied into all the leaders, business and political leaders in these 56 countries. So it's a very influential group. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, there's definitely some truth to that. So, Stephen at a private dinner last Thursday surprised me. He said, I have something for you. And, I've done some research on you, and I want to recognize you as being a global leader. And I was very, touched and humbled. And he said, I have something further, you know, under Queen Elizabeth's patronage, there was 100 original commemorative pins that were made, and that these were made 10 years ago. And he's like, what he said to me was that he had the 99th pin and he was giving me the last one, the 100th pin. And I, you know, now I'm, obviously very touched. I mean, the meaning and symbolism behind it was very beautiful. And I ended up giving that pin to my daughter, Adele, because we call her the queen. So, so I gave that pin to her because, and she loved it. But it was really, very humbling, very touching, very, expect, I didn't expect it. And, the fact that he took the time to learn a little bit more about my journey was very wonderful. And it also, much more important than the recognition was the, opportunity to build a relationship with them. He said that any leader in the Commonwealth, business or political, they have access to, given, the pedigree of the trust, and that he would help me to, connect with anyone in the Commonwealth, which, if you think about it, that's 56 countries, and I'm guessing that when the chairman of the Queen Elizabeth II Commonwealth Trust reaches out, that he gets response, whether via, phone call or email. So it was very, very touching. The other part of it was that as part of this, we have the opportunity to get a private tour of Buckingham Palace. So he offered to set up a private tour. This is not a tour that tourists get, and it would be private. And he offered some interesting dates. He's like, "Do you want to come there during Christmas? It's beautiful." And that might be a tough sell to my wife Samantha, but it was obviously the meaning behind it is very humbling. It's I whatever reason, look, my journey, regardless, all these awards and recognitions are very humbling, but regardless, I'm the same person, and my self-esteem is not derived from any recognitions or awards. What gets me excited, what gets me energized is helping to provide meaning and purpose to people. And God has given us healthcare. So if you give people health, you give them hope. And if you give people hope, you give them everything in this world. And I truly believe that that's my calling, that's my journey. But again, I mean, if you want to write a good joke, you have a Middle East doctor, an executive producer for a movie, getting knighted at the papal residence, at the Super Bowl, and then, getting something from, the Queen Elizabeth II Commonwealth Trust. I mean, it sounds like the beginning of a good joke. That's all I know. But so, we don't take ourselves too seriously. But again, it's another opportunity to connect dots and to find ways to reach people. So I know God has a plan. When I look forward, Stephen, not everything makes sense. Why would an American be deserved of some, kind of British recognition, but as I go through my journey and I look back, everything's always connected somehow. So I'm sure God had a plan, he had a reason. And so again, it's very humbling.
I mean, it really, really, it's remarkable, like you say, right? I mean, you receive this Queen Elizabeth II Commonwealth Trust as a global leader recognition, and from Stephen Ball, the chairman, and it's rare because it's the last of this limited set of 100 pins, commemorative pin, and it's honoring. Really, the trust is really honoring commitment to empowering young leaders across the Commonwealth, 56 nations, creating lasting impact. And it's really supporting leaders across these 56 Commonwealth countries who are working to address some of the world's pressing challenges. And the world does have pressing challenges, and it's from education to healthcare to sustainability inclusion. And you're about all of that. And it's around the belief that local leadership, when supported the right resources and network, can create lasting global impact. And you live that ethos every day. And in fact, I recommend the audience actually follow you on LinkedIn and social media because you have these remarkable journeys and people that you're friends of yours or you meet in your travels, and you always have some resonating message, lessons, inspirations, and you always close with a quote of some sort of lasting impact that can shape people's lives. So, you know, the audience needs to follow you because they will learn lessons, really resonating life lessons, and it will grow from the experiences. And so, if you were to sort of summarize some of the key messages that you put out, what would that be? Maybe three or two or three or maybe five messages. I know servant leadership is always a theme, and maybe you can describe what servant leadership means, and then maybe some of the other messages that you think are key to the world today.
Well, thank you for all of that. So, to me, servant leadership is part of being part of something bigger than yourself. Really, giving is receiving. You know, you know, not giving people a handout, giving them a hand up. And if we can be part of, anything that can help elevate humanity, give people opportunities, and try to bring people together. Um, it's so important. And Sir Isaac Newton, I think, said it best. We build too many walls and not enough bridges. And I think that servant leadership, part of it is being a bridge. You know, a bridge to opportunities, a bridge to a better future, a bridge to a more committed and connected global community. And givers are happier, Stephen. The people that I've met, givers are happier. And there's kind of a concept in my journey that there's scarcity and then there's abundance. So just because I always use hummus, let's say you got a bowl of hummus, okay? A metaphorical bowl of hummus. Probably the vast majority of the world, if you give up some of your hummus, there's less for you. That's the vast majority of the world. That's the mindset. But I truly believe, instead of scarcity, in abundance. So the more proverbial hummus you give out, the more it comes back to you. And it's a whole mindset. It's a whole belief system. And I truly believe in radical abundance. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, believe in that concept. And the more you give, the more you share. And you're the same way. I mean, you speak around the world and you're sharing your time, talent, and treasure to kind of help advance, innovations and advance things that are good for the greater, the greater global community. And I just think that's so important. And a lot of people have concerns about where the world's going today, given all the geopolitical tensions. But I think in friendships and partnerships, Stephen, like you and I are building, a quote from Margaret Mead always comes to mind. And she said, never doubt a bunch of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And no one person has all the answers. But I think, people like ourselves can come together and hopefully come up with ways to take on some of the most daunting challenges of the world. And there's also a biblical reference. King David had his right-hand person, Benaiah, and Benaiah, they had like 70 men. but they were like they were an incredible army together. So it's not the quantity, it's the quality of the relationships. It's the, you know, and people having alignment and mission, values, and vision doesn't mean you agree on everything. I have some of my dearest friends. We look at the world from a very different lens, but the common thread, the common bond is we want to help the world and make the world a better place. So it doesn't matter what lens you have, but I think if you have that meaning and purpose at the core of your relationships, I think that's when you can truly do amazing things together. And I've always felt that with you. And, trying to be on this journey, find others that come from that same perspective, that same mindset, radical abundance, I think is a beautiful thing. It's very rewarding.
I have daily interactions with senior executives of big tech companies and things like that. And I came from a conference about 10 days ago where I had some really great interactions. And there's this idea, and it's more than that. It's an ethos and a way of thinking where um, they want people to go after 10x goals or 100x goals, or that things that seem impossible because they're not impossible. Because stepwise refinement, you can tackle something that's really big, even though the operating systems or the tools are not in place to fully complete it. But just by visioning ahead to these what some people would consider impossible, then you actually accomplish these things. And because I do follow you every day, and I actually respond every day to your posts, you have that kind of messaging as well. So can you talk about that? Because you don't think of barriers, or that's my perception. So can you talk about that?
So in my world, nothing's impossible. Nothing. And in fact, if you look at the impossible, if you break it up, it's I'm possible. So again, I truly believe in my heart of hearts that, you know, good people, good intentions, great things happen. Now, the end goal, may not always be the way we perceive it, because part of this process is, I think, again, I look at it from a place of faith. But I think part of this journey is, God is revealing certain things, and it may be different than we envisioned. But I truly believe today that people that when there's alignment and mission, values, vision, and obviously with the tools today with AI and tech and all the other things, when you take the best people have from alignment of mission and values and vision and overlay some of the incredible tools that is out there, then there's nothing that can be done. And I want to use an example you shared with me. Uh, so, people are talking about some of the most challenging medical conditions. And you shared this fact with me, which I recently shared at the London Business School, that in 70 years, 214,000 structures of protein molecules were identified in 70 years. Well, Demis Hassabis, who runs Google AI now, through this Alpha Fold 3, in 1 year, he identified 214 million protein structures. You brought this to my attention. And, a thousandfold, increase in throughput in 1 year. And he won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 2024. And so when you talk about impossible, when you talk about, some of the most daunting diseases out there, coming up with treatments, when you talk about, anti-aging, you know, I keep telling my wife, I'm going to be a spring chicken here in the next few years, and not quite the reaction that you might imagine, but that's, but when you look at the possibilities. Literally anything is on the table. If you would have told me 10 years ago autonomous driving cars are going to be a reality, I was very skeptical because of the legal, the regulatory. Now, when I go to San Francisco, when I went there for the Super Bowl, you see Waymo there. They're testing Waymo in London. Autonomous driving cars are reality now. And then you see what's going on with the robots, the humanoid robots and AI. I mean, literally anything's possible today. And, but despite the technology, I think having people that have alignment and mission and values and vision, if you take these opportunities for breakthroughs, and you take people that have alignment and mission, values, and vision, when you put that together, literally, there's no limit to what can be done. There's no limit to what can be solved. And I'm seeing it. The breadth and scope and depth of what's happening out there is mind numbing. When you talk about implanting things in the body now, and it's just incredible. And so it's never been a more exciting time. I do, I love organizations like you help start AI for Good. And I think, kind of remembering our human values in all of this is very, very important. But there's never been a more exciting time to make a difference. And I think the amount of good that can be done is incredible. But I also think it goes the other way too. I think the people that don't have the right intent, there's certain risks involved with it as well. So, just like with everything, there's a duality, and I think the people that really want to do good in the world need to unite, and it's just exciting times.
So this is now towards the close of our dialogue here. What would you like to do next? So you've got a number of initiatives. They're global in nature, also North American in nature as well. Uh, what are some of your key areas that you're targeting right now?
So I think, again, from a personal perspective, we've been on a 28-year journey to make healthcare as affordable and accessible to as many people as we can globally. J&B is kind of the quintessential global distributor of products and services. As we saw during COVID, the supply chain was a proverbial 8-track tape, and we're trying to make it a proverbial iPhone, and using technology, using innovation. We think that we're going to be able to make healthcare much more affordable and accessible to all. And then also, in our unique partnership, I think we're going to be able to make investments into areas that are moving quickly and around tech. And I think that's going to be very exciting. And again, I think, I see everything as just being a steward of the blessings. It's not about money, but money is a form of energy. And if we can use energy this energy in the form of resources to advance the greater good, I think it's going to be amazing. So we want to make catalytic investments of our time, talent, and treasure in areas to make the world a better place. In regards to healthcare, not only improve the supply chain, but have a kind of a new paradigm. So in 2000, there was something called Gavi, the Global Alliance of Vaccines and Immunizations. And what they were able to do, kind of using a global tracking system, was to help mitigate the disparities around people getting vaccinations. And I think we can take that to the next step and do that for all medical products and pharmaceutical products, and all the different facets of tech and AI are going to play a role in that. But again, we want to put the human back in humanity. We want to put the care back in healthcare, and making healthcare as affordable, accessible to as many people as we can globally, can bring people together across the religious, the political, and socioeconomic divide. And I think we're going to find every which way that we can to do that.
And because you travel so much, what's your next sort of travel journey looking like?
Well, just like you, God always has a plan. The next one is going to be in Austin, Texas. So I always tell people that if the medical and Middle Eastern part didn't work out, I could always try the cowboy route. So there's probably a cowboy hat and a cowboy boots in there, but I have to go to Austin, Texas. That's the next one, and then I have to go to Middle East and just like you, there's a whole series of things. There's always opportunities there. So kind of shake hands, kiss babies. It's drop me in the proverbial desert and we'll be making some hummus and selling some medical products in no time. I have that confidence. So
Yeah, and then you're always doing with your kids, right? Their soccer games or their sports
uh,
initiatives and things like that. And you're driving them and making sure that you're there. So you're present in so many different areas, to your family and to your enterprise's servant leadership around the world as well. It's quite remarkable that you're able to execute in so many different dimensions, but in a heartfelt and thoughtful, very thoughtful ways. So I would say you're unique. I've never met anybody like you that can do this in such a heartfelt way and move the needle in positive ways as well across so many different dimensions. Yeah, you definitely have a matrix multiplying flywheel impact globally. So um, again, blessings to you, Stephen, and thank you for coming in. And maybe just one last question. What recommendations and questions would you like to leave the audience?
so I want to challenge your audience. I know you have some incredible people that you've interviewed and connected with and built relationships on your journey. And I want to challenge each and every person in your audience. Ask them. With great blessings come great responsibilities, and what are you doing with your blessings? What are you doing with your time, talent, and treasure? And how are you giving back? And if more people come in from the radical abundance mindset, your audience is a who's who of so many areas. And I want to challenge everyone to ask the question, okay, I'm blessed. So what am I doing to give back? What am I doing to help to do something, that's, bigger than myself, and I want everyone to ask that question. And Mother Teresa said it best, there are no great things, only small things with great love. And it doesn't have to be getting awards or doing grand things. In fact, a lot of times the things that are most special are helping people and they never know it's and that's in my faith, they say that's one of the greatest blessings. So, I want to challenge each and every person to kind of ask that question because I know you have an incredible audience and you built such a great ecosystem and I think having that kind of perspective, that daily I think we all got to ask that question every day. And I'm just grateful to everyone. I'm sending many blessings and love to everyone. And I'm here. Please feel free to get my contact information from Stephen. If you guys want a little daily dose of love and light, please feel free to follow me. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram and all these different things, not because I want any attention, but it's just a way to share my journey. It's kind of a way to diary my journey. So I'm sure Stephen can, share with you my different social media. But I'm grateful. I'm sending much love and light to everyone. Stephen, you're like a brother from another mother. I'm very grateful for your friendship. And I just, much love to all.
So thank you again, Stephen. And again, please take special care and blessings to you and all of your travels and all of the reverberating multiplicative work that you do globally and all for social good and positive good. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you. And if anyone is in Michigan, give me a call. I don't know about any business, but we always eat well. If you like Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, we're the bomb. So I think Stephen can attest to that. So let me know if you guys are in Michigan. Again, much love and light.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.